Alright, so I want to take a look at the latest Ubuntu release, 2504 Plucky Puffins. This is from the 9 to 5 Linux website article, and I'll leave a link to this article. But basically this was released a few days ago, and I've been on vacation, just now got back to be able to do any sort of videos on Linux. A lot of this stuff was released while I was on vacation. But I want to take a look at this interim release. Now this is different obviously than the LTS releases, which are released every 2 years. These interim releases are released every 6 months, and I believe they have like a 9-month service. They're supported for 9 months, so when you're using an interim release, you're going to upgrade basically every 6 to 9 months, because they are a limited release, if you will. Most people would probably want to use, if you're using Ubuntu in a production environment, you're going to want to use LTS. I use Ubuntu server on my Nextcloud that actually my son set up, and we have a Nextcloud server that runs Ubuntu LTS on that. But I haven't really had a chance to take a look at the latest interim releases in a while. Usually when I'm messing around with Ubuntu, I'm messing around with the LTS releases, so this will be the first time I've tried out one of the interim releases in quite some time. But I wanted to give this a shot and take a look at some of the new features on it. It's going to be powered by the latest 6.14 kernel, which is going to have some better hardware support for newer features. That's the latest kernel as of right now, I believe. Yeah, we're looking at 6.14. 13 is the latest release right now, so this is the latest kernel currently. And they've also enabled triple buffering feature for low-end systems, so that's for the GNOME 48 to smooth out the animations. That will be nicer on older systems where the animations can be a little jerky, so that's pretty cool that GNOME will be smooth theoretically on a lower powered machine, whereas GNOME kind of has been known to be sort of heavy desktop environment, so having smoother animations and things like that on lower end systems will make the experience much nicer. Some exciting changes in Ubuntu 2504 include the official generic ARM64 desktop ISO. So if you use an ARM based system, you can have support for that, Snapdragon, all that sort of stuff. So if you're using one of those sort of devices, they have an official ISO that you can use for those ARM64 systems. The Ubuntu desktop installer has been updated again, so I'd like to take a look and see what that's going to look like. They say it's going to have dual boot improvements, so if you're using Windows, you may have an easier time setting up dual boot, especially with the BitLocker and all that sort of stuff. So that would be good for those who need to dual boot between Ubuntu and Windows, for example. Ubuntu 2504 brings some networking enhancements as NetPlan receives support for WPA, PSK, SHA-256 Wi-Fi connections, so better Wi-Fi support and things like that through NetPlan. Support for configuring routing policy on Network Manager backend, and support for new functionality in Systemd Network D Wait Online to wait for DNS servers to be configured and reachable before considering an interface to be online. So that'll help with as your system boots and everything and connecting. With NetPlan, I generally switch over to Network Manager as the backend for my NetPlans when I set up Ubuntu manually. But if I'm just using the interim release, I'll just whatever it's going to default set up as is probably what I'll use, because I'm not going to install it in a minimal sort of environment. I'm going to use kind of what's going to be default. Let's see, other than that, the XDG terminal exec package is now installed by default for easier access to default terminal using Control-Alt-T keyboard. Papers has been added as the default document viewer instead of events. I've always used events. Matter of fact, I think I use that even on this system. Yeah, so I've always used events. I don't think I've ever even used Papers, so I will like take a look at that and see what that new document viewer looks like, and if it's nicer than events, I might switch it on my main systems, because I kind of like events for my document viewing. Among other noteworthy changes, the App Armor package now includes many new profiles for apps to improve sandboxing and mitigate the impact of any exploits in confined apps. Again, better support. App Armor is good for having some extra layer of security. What do we have? The JPEG XL image format is supported by default, and NVIDIA Dynamic Boost is now enabled by default on supported laptops and NVIDIA GPUs. So we got some good NVIDIA support going on with these systems. NVIDIA support in Linux has definitely had leaps and bounds over the last couple of years. That's great. It brings full support for the Intel Core Ultra Xe2 integrated graphics and the ARC graphics. These are those new Intel GPUs that have come out. I've not used any of those, but they are supposed to be fairly well, and that's good that they have good support now. I'm not sure what the support was like before, but I know the ARC graphics, things like that, are relatively new. So that's cool that you have. Again, like if you're using the interim releases, you may get a better hardware support, especially if you have a brand new system. You just bought a brand new laptop, you just built a brand new computer, and you're wanting to use Ubuntu. You may want to consider using the interim release instead of the LTS release. You can get the backported kernels and things like that in the LTS, but if you really want the latest and greatest, using these interim releases and just basically upgrading every 6 months isn't that big a deal. You get a little bit better stability than a straight up rolling release, but yeah, you still kind of get more up-to-date software every 6 months. You just got to go through the hassle of doing a full upgrade every 6 months, which generally speaking with Ubuntu goes fairly smooth. There's going to be hiccups from time to time, but again, you get a lot of hiccups in rolling releases, so choose your poison. I generally still would recommend the LTS release if your hardware supports it just fine, and if you're not too worried about the absolute latest GNOME and the absolute latest greatest stuff, because you can get a lot of updated softwares through Flatpaks and snaps and things like that. So again, if it's a system you're really wanting to have better stability with, not have to worry about upgrading quite as much, you're going to want to stick to the LTS. But if you prefer tinkering around with the latest, seeing what the latest GNOME is like, and the direction that Ubuntu is going, because a lot of the features in these interim releases eventually make it into the LTS releases. So I'm going to download the ISO, and we're going to boot it up and see what the install is going to look like. Okay, now when you boot up the ISO, this is what you're going to be greeted with. This is the installer. I don't know if you can hear that noise in the background, but that's my son jumping on his indoor trampoline. But this is what the installer will look like when you first boot it up, and you can choose your language. So we're going to go with English, and here you have some accessibility options, which is really nice for those with disabilities. You can do high contrast, large text, reduce animations. You can do a screen reader. You can do visual alerts if you're hearing impaired, sticky keys and slow keys. So they've added a lot of accessibility options, which I truly do appreciate this, being that I do have some family members with disabilities, and this is a great tool to be able to have in Linux, which is one of the great things with Ubuntu, is some of their accessibility options are really well done. You can do your keyboard layout, depending on where you're at. You can set up your internet connection at this point. You can also just don't do internet connection right now if you don't want to. This is set up as wired through my VM, so I could just do that. I've done these installs on Wi-Fi, and they seem to work just fine. You can try out Ubuntu if you're just wanting to use the live CD and kind of test the system out, which I kind of do recommend if you've never used it before. Burn the ISO onto a thumb drive or something like that. Boot the system up. Instead of installing it, play around with the system, see how it works on your system, and see if you like it or something you're interested in or just want to test out. But we're actually going to go ahead and install. Now here's something kind of new here. That we got the interactive install or the automatic install. The interactive is for users who want to be guided step by step through the installation process. Automated install with an install file. If you have an install script, you can use that. This is good for multiple deployments. Again, it's more advanced if you want to set up the exact same configuration on multiple machines. You can set up a YAML file and have the exact same install on several machines. But most people are going to probably want to do the interactive installations because you're just going to be installing this on your desktop or your laptop or something like that, and you're going to configure it for that specific system. You could do this. Is another thing they kind of have newish is you could do the default selection, which kind of is just the essentials. It's a more slimmed down version. You could do the extended selection where they add a lot more stuff. Some people would call that bloat. I just do the default, just kind of the basic stuff you need, because you can always add that extra software later. But if you want a full blown everything kitchen sink install, you can do the extended edition. It'll give you more things like office tools and a few other selection of tools to use. The next one, the install recommended proprietary software. This is if you have, especially if you're using something like NVIDIA, or you have some proprietary or some hardware that needs some proprietary drivers, some Wi-Fi drivers, some video cards, things like that. Also the media codecs, if you're wanting to play certain media files, you'll need those proprietary codecs. I would recommend go ahead and doing these just to make sure you have full support for all of the things you need. And then here you can do a manual install if you're wanting to do a dual boot type of system, or you're wanting to set up your partitions manually, configure things manually, you can. If you're just doing this, you have like one disk, you're just want to install just Ubuntu on it, just do the first option here will just create the system for you pretty simply. Encryption, again, this is if you're wanting to set up disk encryption for some extra layer of security. Say you have a laptop that you're going to be traveling with or something like that, you may want to enable encryption so that if your laptop happens to get stolen or something like that, they can't access your files without that encryption key. So this is definitely something you might want to recommend, especially on a laptop. On a desktop, it's going to be on your home, and you're the only person that's going to be using it, or you know everybody that's going to be using it. You may not need to even worry about this. In a VM, again, I'm not worried about this at all. This is something I would really only use, me personally, on like a machine that has the potential of being compromised, or you just really want that extra layer of security as a peace of mind. Here you can set up your name, computer name. Let's just call this Puffy. You know, given today, I don't think I want to call it Puffy. We'll call it Stan. We'll just call our computer Stan. You can name your computer whatever you want to. So we have your username, your name, which you could actually do your full name, and then you can do your username here. And password can be exactly whatever you want it to be. And it'll let you do a weak password too. It won't complain about it other than just tell you it's a weak password. You can require login, or you can make it automatic login. You can use Active Directory if that's something you need. It usually will pick your time zone, especially if you're connected to the internet. It should pick up your time zone, but you can select whatever time zone you're in. And this will just go through and tell you what you have selected and make sure this is how you want to do your system. And then it'll start installing. This process can take a few minutes. I've had Ubuntu releases that take quite a while to install, and I've had some releases that installed pretty quick. So we'll see exactly how quick this is going to install. So we're going to let this install. It's going to give you a few little slides here to kind of tell you about a few things that you can install, some of the stuff that's available for it. It does seem to be a pretty good... That's my son. He's nonverbal autistic, so he kind of runs around and makes those noises. Kind of funny they call it nonverbal because he's the loudest person in my house, but he is a nonverbal autistic child, and he is my sunshine. He's everything to me. I actually have two children. Both of them are autistic. My oldest is a bit higher functioning, but he has a lot of struggles as well. My youngest is the nonverbal autistic son, and he's something. He's fun. So we're going to go ahead and let this install. I may go ahead and pause the video and go ahead and let this run through, and I'll be back after it is done. Alright, after it is done installing, you'll be greeted with this screen, which will tell you that it's time to restart your system. To get into the system, you can also continue testing it. That didn't take very long at all. Actually, I got up, got my son a quick snack, and that was... When I came back, this screen was already here, so this didn't take probably no more than 5 minutes, if that, on this system. So that was a pretty quick install. If you paid attention to the clock up here, I didn't. You may have seen exactly how long that took. So we'll reboot and see what the system's going to look like. It'll tell you to please remove the install medium and press enter, and that just basically means if you have a CD or a thumb drive, just take it out and hit enter and it'll reboot. And as it boots up, you'll get, this is the splash screen that you'll probably have a different icon in the middle that'll be your motherboard or system, like Dell or whatever your system is. And then this is GDM, which is the display manager. That will have your username. Click on it, put in your password that you use to install the system with, and you'll be bumped into here, and you'll have a welcome screen. You probably won't have to do this because it'll probably automatically do it on a bare metal system, but I'm going to go ahead and switch my resolution to look a little better here. There we go. Now this is pretty much what your system's going to look like. Again, you'll be greeted with the welcome screen here. It will go through a few things. It says welcome to Ubuntu, complete your setup with additional settings, and we'll have you up and running in no time. And it says help improve Ubuntu. Help us improve Ubuntu by sharing your system data with us. This includes things like your machine model, installed software, and the location you choose for your time zone. This is basically data collection if you want. I usually don't do these things. They're supposedly supposed to be fairly privacy oriented. This is probably a lot better than what, say, Microsoft or Apple would do, or Google, or for that matter. But I still generally don't do data collection in any sort of way on most of my systems. This just tells you about the App Center, which we'll kind of go through. They do have desktop icons. Some GNOME systems don't. You have to get a separate extension to get desktop icons, but Ubuntu has that built in. Speaking of Software Center, this is what the App Center looks like, which I think is a snap file, which if you don't know what that is, don't really worry about it. That's just a format that Ubuntu uses for their software, some of their software. And in here you should be able to look for anything you want. Say you want OBS, you have an unofficial OBS install, which is made by Snap. If I could spell, say you want like Discord, you have Discord here if you need it. Oh, well, there we go. We have some sort of bug already. Something went wrong. We're sorry, but we're not sure what the error is. Okay, I don't know if that was from the Software Center or if that was just from the system. I made one mistake, is I installed this without running updates first. So you can use the Software Center to do updates? Yeah, looks like you can. You can do updates through the Software Center. Allow system snaps. Interesting. Okay, installed apps. Huh. I'm not 100% sure what that is. Says no updates available. Says everything is up to date. I am curious though. What I'm going to do is, you generally wouldn't have to do this. It doesn't hurt if you're new to Linux to learn some commands from the terminal. I know a lot of people that shy away from that, and generally speaking you don't have to use the terminal when using Ubuntu. I'm just very used to it. But if you want to manually do your updates from the terminal, you can do sudo apt update and then type in your password. If I could type, and yeah, everything is up to date. And sudo apt upgrade, if there was, it looks like there was it may have already did the updates when it installed, possibly. If I can't remember if it had an option for that to automatically do the updates when you install it, but there is no updates. But if you get something like this where it says this package is no longer required, you can go ahead and remove it by doing this command here, and it'll sometimes tell you exactly what you need to do. So sudo apt auto remove will remove that file that's no longer needed. That was probably because Grub is using EFI, and I think maybe this is the non-EFI version of Grub, so it just removed it. I could be wrong on that, don't quote me, but I think that's basically all that is. That's not a big deal to remove that. It's not removing Grub, it's just removing the version of Grub that's not needed for this system. Now, if you're wanting to upgrade your snaps, because again, the system does use what's called snaps, which is just another file. See, within Ubuntu, the main file formats or packaging formats it uses is apt and snaps. You can enable things like flat packs and app images as well. Again, you can look into those things, but built into the system, it is apt and snaps. But you can automatically refresh your snaps if you want to. Sudo snap refresh will, of course, I don't know if you can see that very well. How do you increase? What is this? Let's just up that a little bit. Sorry about the small print, but let me go ahead and clear that out. So again, the one command was, the sudo apt update and then sudo apt upgrade, and that will make sure your system's upgraded. The other command is sudo snap refresh, and that will go through and make sure all your snaps are refreshed. Things like your Firefox browser and all that will be a snap. You can change the dark style here, which is cool. So if you like the dark themes better, and everything should switch over to a darker theme. So you got dark and you got light. So you can change those themes. Again, the App Center is here if you're wanting to install things. Say you want to play some games. They do have Steam, and you can install Steam, and that works pretty well on the system. Okay, hold on a second. My son is wanting something else. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. He just wanted some bread. He likes to eat just plain bread sometimes, so I gave him 2 pieces of plain bread. I do feed him other things, but he enjoys his plain bread sometimes. So here again is just what the system will look like. I don't know what that error was when I first opened the Software Center. It's weird because it said, had an error. We don't know what it is. That's not a good look. I must admit, that's not a good look. And I've noticed that sometimes with the interim releases, you'll get weird bugs and errors like that. It's not as stable and polished as the LTS releases. So getting those little weird bugs like that happens quite a bit. As the LTS releases are released, they get point releases, which a lot of those kind of bugs get fixed. In the interim releases, these in-between releases, they don't get those kind of point releases, so a lot of these bugs kind of hang around. Again, that's kind of why I don't recommend per se using these full-time. If you're going to use Ubuntu, I think most of their effort and things go into that LTS release. So that's what I recommend, and obviously there's very little difference in the way these look. GNOME hasn't changed the way it's looked in quite some time, so if you've used any version of Ubuntu in the past couple years, this is all going to look very familiar. So this is the system. This is it installed, booted in. With the minimal install, you don't get a whole lot. You get a few little system tools. You get a very little install, which I kind of like. The full-blown install just has tons of crap installed on it. This is very minimal. Oh, we wanted to look at that new document viewer. This is it, right? This is supposed to be paper. Is that what they said it was? Is there a website for it? Yeah, papers. I've actually never used this one. So this is what's going to be replacing events. Looks very similar to events. I don't have a document to test it out with, but yeah, it looks very, very similar. Very, very similar to events. So I don't really see a big difference there. Again, you can go to the About here, and it'll show you the system. Of course, I named it Stan just randomly. Tell you your processor, the hardware. Of course, this is using a virtual machine, so it's kind of weird. The memory, disk capacity. You can go to System Details. This will tell you what kernel you're using. So we're using, again, the 614. It's using Wayland by default. I don't know if I'm thinking they use Wayland on default even if you're using an NVIDIA card nowadays. So Wayland's pretty much it. I'm wanting to say even like Fedora's, most of their flagship stuff's removed Xword completely. So almost everything is Wayland. Again, you can go to your dark mode. You can switch your accent color, which is like these little folders and things like that can be switched to different colors, which is kind of cool. And they got some pretty good looking wallpapers. They don't have a ton. That's neat. That's pretty cool. But they have a few different wallpapers. I like that too. That's kind of neat. So you can switch those around. Obviously, you can add your own at any time. The Ubuntu desktop, this is just the stuff that Ubuntu has added on top of GNOME. So they have their own dock, obviously. You can do a smaller dock. You can do it at the bottom if you want to. You can make it go across at the bottom if that's something you really prefer. There's extensions you can get to add a menu and everything else. So you can show your mounted volumes. If you have like a thumb drive, throw it in there, or an extra hard drive in your system, it'll kind of show up down here if you have that configured to show it. Showing your trash icon, so you can move that around, play around with it however you want. You know, if you want it to look like that, you can do auto hide, so you know it'll pop up when you want to. Change your icon size if you want it bigger, so you can kind of get a sort of a Macintosh look on this if you really want to, which is kind of neat. So there's some built-in customizations you can go through. You can add your online accounts like Google, Microsoft, Nextcloud, stuff like that. You can add an email server if you have one of those that you want to connect to. Printers are usually set up. This probably won't find my printer because I don't really have this on the network with my printer, I don't believe. But generally speaking, when I install Ubuntu, it finds my printer just right off because my printer is connected to the network. So generally, I don't know what well-being is. Oh, it'll tell you your screen time. You can limit your screen time. You can do eyesight reminders, remind you to look away from the screen. So that's kind of like eye health and well-being health stuff. You can also obviously enable or disable it however you see fit. Power management, you know, you can do balanced. You can do power saver. This is good for like laptops or if you're wanting to reduce your energy output. Display, you can go through and change whatever you need there for your refresh rate. It does have fractional scaling if you want to. You can set the scale, you know, if you want to. However you need for those sort of things to make things look and feel the way you want it to. Bluetooth seems to have worked fairly well for me when I've used it on Ubuntu. I don't do a whole lot of Bluetooth, but some of the stuff that I have connected has worked fairly well. You still have your accessibility stuff here, which is nice. If you need your desktop zoom, this is really good for poor eyesight. You can do magnification factor. Lots of cool things for different needs as far as for special needs and things like that. So I'm glad that they are enabling a lot of this stuff, and it seems to be getting better and better for accessibility. I think that is extremely important and is overlooked a lot of times in systems, so especially Linux systems. So it's nice that they're adding those things in. I believe KDE has some of those options as well, but GNOME is doing a pretty good job with it. So overall, this is pretty basic, normal little Ubuntu system. This is kind of what most of them have looked like over the past few years. Nothing real major. If you've used Ubuntu, you're going to be very comfortable with this. Again, I would probably recommend sticking with LTS unless you just really want to try out the new features and things. But it does seem stable. We just had that one error. I haven't really played around with this much on hardware. I may throw it on my laptop and toy around with it a little bit more just to see if I get more errors or if anything else kind of seems to happen. But so far, though, the system in the VMs and things have been stable. And generally speaking, it's going to be stable in Ubuntu. But at the risk of sounding like a broken record, yeah, you're going to want to maybe stick with an LTS release just to avoid some issues possibly. But that's about it. There's not much else to really say. It's a good system. It's a stable system. You're going to get great support for software with Ubuntu. You can install lots of different things. If you prefer something like the Brave browser, you can install that through the website. They have a script here you can even run. But I am curious if I want to say there is a Brave Snap. I don't know how well it works. Yeah, they have Brave through here as well, which I'm assuming is a Snap package. I'm curious how it works. I want to say I've used the Brave Snap before and it wasn't real great, but if you want the apt package, you can get it here just from Brave if you prefer Brave or you like Brave. Some people do, some people don't. The default Firefox, a lot of people are mad about here recently because of some of the stuff Mozilla's been doing, but the browser itself seems to function pretty well. That installed pretty quick, so oh yeah, that booted up fast for Snap. A lot of things people complain about is Snaps boot up slow, but they've fixed a lot of that over the years. So allow the change. Yeah, sure, we'll make it our default. Why not? And there we go. So you have Brave. Let's just see for poops and wiggles. Well, they have Chromium. You can't get just straight Chrome, can you? You can do Debian packages now, so that's cool. So they have both Debian and Snap in the Software Center. But you can do like Vivaldi. Yeah, I don't see... Yeah, I don't see Google Chrome as a actual Snap or anything like that, so you'd have to do that manually, which is pretty easy. If you really need Google Chrome, you can run here and you can download it. So you can do if you go to Google Chrome, you really need it for Linux, you can get the deb file here and install it. This is for Fedora or OpenSUSE, but you can do Debian Ubuntu on here. You can also enable Flat Hub if you want. This is again similar to Snaps and things, but they're going to have a lot of software here. They will have stuff like Google Chrome and lots of proprietary software here as well. Again, if you're really wanting Flat Hub, you can go to Setup and go to Ubuntu and you can install it. One of the caveats here is I believe it will add a separate software center to your system. Not a big deal because you can use either or. I don't think they'll conflict with each other, but I've not tested that a lot. A lot of times when I use Flatpaks, I just install them in the terminal anyway because say we enable Flatpaks. You just open up your terminal and you input these commands. Now if you enable the plugin, it's going to install a software center. So I'll show you what it's talking about. Now let me go ahead and switch that back so you can tell. Let's go to our desktop. Let's see, where was that at? Configure our dock. No, let's just do that on the left and do that. We'll turn off auto hide. That way it looks back to the default. Sorry. So again, this is your main software center. This is a Snap, I believe. But when you install the Flatpak, if you use the software plugin, you're going to get another software center, which is going to be called Software. This one's called App Center, and this one's called Software. So that's one of the problems that might bug you, is that you're going to have two software centers. Both of them work just fine, but this will, once you enable the FlatHub repository, you'll be able to use that second software center to install Flatpaks. Now I'll probably have to restart the system for it to actually show up, but that's if you're wanting Flatpaks. If you don't really know what any of this stuff kind of is, it's not that big a deal. But sometimes if you're having a hard time finding your software, Ubuntu, sometimes switching over to FlatHub, you might find more software that you're wanting there. So just having those options available is nice. App images are a little quirky. That's another package format that's kind of popular, is app images. They're a little quirky in Debian or in Ubuntu. I think you have to install some extra packages. I can't remember what it was called. It was yeah, it was like libfuse2t64, something like that. Yeah, it's something weird. You had to install that. This file right here, you'd have to do apt installed libfuse2t64 to get your app images to work, or I've always had to. And even then, I've had some issues with app images in Ubuntu, even after doing that. So if you're really wanting to use an app image, if you know what that is, and you're really wanting to use it, just Google it, and should be able to find the information you need on how to get those up and running. But most everything else you need is either going to be in the main software center, or you install something like FlatHub, or you can just go to the website of whatever you're wanting. If it has a Linux version, they'll usually show you how to install it, and usually there's a Ubuntu tutorial on how to get it installed. So anyway, this is Puffy Puffins. This is the latest Ubuntu release. It is just like most other Ubuntu releases. There's nothing super negative I've seen. It's a great release. I recommend it. And I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I hope you guys enjoyed listening to my son. God bless you guys. I hope everybody had a good Easter, and thank y'all so much for watching the video. I hope you can like and subscribe if you're wanting to. If not, well, thanks for watching so far. Anyway, God bless, and see y'all later.